Testing, 1, 2, 3. Okay, hi everyone, how are we doing? Day 3 of reading, it's day 3, right? Not day 2? Yeah, okay, awesome. Well, thanks everyone, it's 2.5? Okay, I love that spirit. So thanks everyone for joining us today. My name is, I gotta do the clicker, my bad. I'm sorry, I'm all over the place. So my name is Mikiko Baisley, I'm a staff developer advocate at MongoDB. But I know you guys are really here to hear from DraftKings. Specifically, we have Jeff Singer, who's the VP of Engineering. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, so I manage the product platform engineering teams at DraftKings. So that is our account, financial, marketing, customer service, and risk platform teams. And I've been at DraftKings for about 10 years, so it's been a pretty wild ride over that time.
Yeah, so could you tell us a little bit more about DraftKings?
Yes. I imagine most of you, particularly anyone who has a TV in the United States, has heard of DraftKings in some manner. But we're a digital sports entertainment company. Our products you probably have most heard of are online sports betting, casino, daily fantasy. We have a couple other brands that we operate as well, the Jackpocket Lottery and Golden Nugget Casino as well.
Yeah. And specifically, why we're here talking today is DraftKings is a MongoDB customer. They're one of our most successful customer stories. In an industry like betting and gaming, we love those stories. So DraftKings uses MongoDB across several systems, particularly the backend services that power their online sports betting platform, as well as multiple CMS-style internal tools. So today we're going to explore how DraftKings is embracing platform engineering and generative AI to dramatically increase speed, empower internal builders, and evolve their architecture with MongoDB at the center. Yeah. So to just kind of start getting into it, so at your scale of 1,500 plus engineers, rapid product cycles, new regulatory and market pressures, your team has had to rethink how to build with speed while still empowering internal teams. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I think for us, speed is the most important thing when we're thinking about how we build. We really want to enable our teams to move very, very quickly. And I think what we've found is that some of the new Gen AI stuff that's come out has actually kind of enabled a whole other class of builders at DraftKings. You know, DraftKings has probably 1,800 or so people in engineering, but there's another 3,000 employees outside of engineering. And now we're trying to enable, through building out more of their AI platform, those people to be more of builders as well themselves. But we've also needed to invest in the platform to enable developers to build faster. So, you know, some of that is things like better tools for AI. That's also things, though, like the same no-code tools that people are using outside of engineering that engineers can use to make their daily lives better. But it's also investments into the core platform on the engineering side to enable people to spin up a new database faster, to spin up a new microservice faster, to build new products entirely faster than we could before. And so we found that those investments have been really key in enabling us to move faster and faster over the past couple of years.
Yeah, and especially with DraftKings, like you guys have a DNA of, you know, shipping fast, while still at the same time you have to have a certain level of resiliency for your user experience. So when the kind of, you know, push for no-code, low-code tools like first started coming up, what was that like internal sort of dialogue like in terms of both, you know, identifying what tools to use and also how to adopt them?
Yeah, I mean, for us, I think we view our most important feature as uptime. And I think we've done a lot with live sports recently, and it's actually really, really important to have really great uptime for those live moments. You can't have odds not available when a big event has just happened inside the game, because that's when the customers want to be there. That's the feature that is going to decide which app a customer reaches for first if they're going to place a bet during the game. So that uptime is super, super important to us. And the the kind of follow-on to that is what can we build that isn't going to endanger that? And so we focused a lot internally on our own workflows, on the things that people were doing, on sort of the toil that was happening inside our organization, as opposed to immediately trying to build customer-facing things, particularly with like no-code solutions and things like that. I think the conversation was once we shifted to look at those workflows and that sort of toil, there was a lot of excitement internally because everyone likes to make their own lives better.
Yeah, and I love how you kind of, you emphasize the very heavy metrics-driven kind of perspective you need to take when you're looking at new technologies. I think it's really helpful for the audience to hear, like, what did impact mean inside your org? You identified a couple key metrics, but were there some other ones that you guys had looked at and were trying to see how you could achieve?
Yeah, so I think most of these cases where people are trying to apply AI somewhere, this is an existing process. And so you can sort of measure how much human toil is going against this process as it exists today. And if we apply AI, how does that actually change over time? But the other thing is a lot of our no-code stuff is on N8N as a workflow tool. And that also comes with the great ability to just measure how much people are using it, how much it's being invoked, things like that, which isn't, that's not direct value, but that's a really great proxy for, hey, there's something interesting going on here. Where should we learn more about what this team is doing?
Yeah, and it's interesting too. Like, I want to dig in a little bit on the how you guys are balancing the no-code, low-code kind of task. Because, like, I've heard from like other customers, other users, they'll ask questions like, which do we use, N8N or more agentic orchestration frameworks like LangGraph? And it seems it's a little bit like it's comparing apples to oranges. They have a very sort of different use case and key stakeholders. Can you tell us more in terms of how you're using, for example, like MongoDB as like a vector store and like pairing that with agentic frameworks versus like who's using N8N and how does that kind of feed into the development team?
Yeah, so there's definitely been some really good stories about devs reaching for N8N just to try something. I think that is one of the things that's been powerful for us is it's a really, really quick way to try something and say like, hey, could this work? What would be necessary for this to work? But then I think as we start to see, hey, this is actually would be a pretty production critical thing for us, that's probably a sign that we need a little bit more sort of rigor around it than what we can do in that low-code environment. Things like source control exist for a reason, and being able to reach for them and understand the versions of everything in a really mature way is really important if you're trying to be sort of fully productionized. And so we've defined a little bit of a graduation path for things that have started out as no-code that need more. Now, some of it, if it's just like, I'm automating a thing that, Jeff, I do myself every day, that's, that probably doesn't need a whole lot. We don't need to go reach for strands or MLflow or anything like that to automate that. But if it's something that is, for the whole customer service organization to be using, that's something where we really want to have a lot of rigor around it, and that's where we've invested a little bit more in graduating that up to a little bit more of a production.
It also seems like a really nice way to get buy-in from, let's say, your non-technical users. And, well, buy-in from the development team, first off, that they have a place in this world, but also buy-in from the non-technical users as well, that their needs are being met. They're not being prevented from using generative AI tools to do their work.
Yeah, and it's been really great to discover. And I think we've done a lot of hackathons recently, enabling non-technical people to use some of these tools. And we've had some great ideas come out of the teams themselves who really understand the workflows, really understand where the problems are and where there might be opportunities. And I think that's also helped get buy-in on any changes that need to happen in those orgs, sort of react to new tools being available if the ideas are coming from them and they're able to experiment and understand what the capabilities are themselves, rather than having someone in an engineering team they've never worked with before come and say like, hey, I'm going to come here and tell you how to do your job now. That doesn't usually work well.
Yeah, that's how you get shadow IT, right? Let's dig in a little bit more in terms of how your engineering team adapted to working with AI-powered automation in their day-to-day workflows. Can we talk a little bit more, for example, about like what are some projects or workflows we've seen go through that graduation process?
Yeah, so I think there was a interesting example in my marketing team where they had started to think about how can we make some of the operations that people are doing to deal with promotions on a daily basis easier. We obviously want promotions that are relevant to the sports content that's today. Today would not be a great day to do a really big MLB promotion because no one cares about MLB in November. So it's a very calendar-driven daily task, and the team started out, they spent a week or two iterating on something in N8N, and I think they started to get to something that, hey, this is really interesting, and a really good thing that we could build out for the team, and now they're in the process of taking it even further and really building it embedded into all of the tools that the people are using today, as opposed to some separate AI thing off to the side. It's just going to be part of the workflow for people going forward.
Yeah, and let's dig in a little bit more too about what the engineers are building for themselves.
Yeah,
so
sure.
One of the things you guys have built out, for example, was a code review agent. We've heard this is a very common use case. It's almost the first thing that a lot of the engineering teams that are our users and customers actually build in terms of agents. So a code review agent built with Anthropic and AWS Bedrock. So what, how well has it been adopted, and what did that process kind of look like?
Yeah, so we actually got it started very early with this agent. I think it was back in late 2023, early 2024 when people first started playing with it. And we built something, and it was able to provide code review comments on code reviews, and I think that's probably the only nice thing that people would have said about the very first versions of it. We started to iterate over time, and I think we started to see it was a little bit becoming harder to justify the continued investment in it because the landscape was changing so quickly, and we were trying to find an architecture that was going to let us keep up with the latest advancements in what AI coding tools were doing without needing to be sort of our own research lab, basically. And so we transitioned over to using Claude Code to actually run the code review itself and calling that via Bedrock, which made all of our InfoSec and security people happy. And that was a really big increase in quality, partially because we were using much newer models, but also because of the actual context management that Claude Code has that we could take advantage of. And that's been a really big success. Most of our repositories now have that available to them. And I think the quality of comments and the actual time to code review has substantially decreased because of that, because all of the obvious questions get asked within a minute or two of posting a PR without a person having to look at it, which really just speeds up the conversation. A junior dev who's made a silly mistake learns about it right away, fixes it before a human spends any time looking to find that silly mistake.
I like the fact that you mentioned that there are still junior devs on your team. I think that's awesome. And I think that's a common question that we get too, because I think some companies are struggling a little bit with how to infuse AI skills and talent into their existing org. Like, do they need to hire some, unicorns, or can they kind of upskill their existing engineering teams? So, what skills or practices do you see and did see becoming essential for the engineers at DraftKings for them to embrace like AI?
So I think the most important thing has been people just using AI coding tools themselves and experimenting with it and trying it. And so we've done a lot to enable different tools and and just like as much as we possibly can enable engineers to have that option. I think seeing what the tools are capable of inside their own work and knowing what works and what doesn't work as far as prompting, and it's kind of like understanding the window of what's possible is a really, really important start for people to gain understanding. And I think that's where we've really centered a lot of this. On the teams that are actually building with AI, we've kind of taken a hybrid of approaches. We have a lot of data science, machine learning background people who are very excited about everything that's going on, and they're working on this and doing education of other dev teams they're working with. There's also just lots of engineers who are very interested in what's going on with this in the industry, and I think like basically every talk at reInvent so far has been about AI. And a lot of those engineers are also helping to kind of spread some knowledge within their team. And so we've done a lot of that. I think it's hard to hire too much external talent who knows this really well, because the years of experience here are just very, very low for the most part.
And it's interesting because I think there is a lot of discussion about that boils down to you're not a real engineer if you use coding tools. We hear that a lot on social media, but at the same time, let's be real, we are all using it in some way, shape, or form. So, like, what's the adoption level within the engineering team? Is it like only the junior, senior engineers using it, or do we see it at all levels of like engineering talent?
I actually see our most senior people using it more than our more junior people. I think they find it easier to kind of get the leverage by writing what they want to have happen and spending less time typing, basically. And the more junior people, I think, are able to use it, but they, I think, struggle a little bit more with knowing what to ask for, what's important in the design. They've spent a lot less time giving design feedback to other engineers, which means they probably have less applicable skills to give design feedback to AI. So I would definitely say that the more senior people have adopted it more.
And I really kind of like how, what you're basically saying is, in this case, like, automation isn't really reducing creative thinking amongst your engineers, but it is enhancing innovation, like through speed, through demand validation. Like, does that sound about right?
Yeah, I think we were able to see people quickly build something scrappy that would have taken weeks in hours. And that has really helped validate, like, yeah, this actually is a project worth pursuing, or maybe it isn't. I think we've also seen people, can remember an example where someone on my team came to me and they said, hey, I realize that we've been doing the same thing once a month. It only takes 20 minutes, so we haven't really spent any time working on it. But I actually just spent 45 minutes and I automated it. And previously it probably would have taken a week or so to automate, and it wasn't really worth it, but now we can do that. And I think that actually enables more creativity, because you can spend more time on the stuff that really matters, less time on this sort of like rote, oh, this is just a thing that we had to do that we haven't had time to automate.
Yeah. Love that. And so let's actually go back, and we've sort of been talking about the current state and a little bit of the future state, but let's just actually go back in time for people who maybe aren't familiar with the technical transformation of DraftKings engineering. So you've lived through multiple architectural phases at DraftKings. What was the technology stack when you had started, and what were those like various phases that you guys went through?
Yeah, so when I started at DraftKings, we were just kind of graduating away from a monolithic application. And the only vertical we had at the time was fantasy sports. But we were already sort of seeing that this one monolith didn't scale very well in the face of very large peaks in traffic. Think like 10x your traffic over the course of 10 seconds when a touchdown happens. The monolith wasn't really scaling well for us there. We've then transitioned a lot towards microservices. From there, there's a big migration to get all on Kubernetes, because we're a .NET company. And so the transition to Kubernetes was a little bit painful for us because we also had to move to Linux at the same time. Back when the company was founded in 2012, .NET was Microsoft. And now I think we're much more focused on moving to sort of be more data focused in the way that we're thinking. There's been a really interesting push in the past couple of years to really treat the data that teams are exposing as more of a first-class thing, as opposed to, oh, yeah, you'll use some kind of operational data store, be it Mongo or MySQL or Postgres, and then some data team will come in and use change data capture and suck that out. And then if you want to change anything about your data schema, just let them know, and you guys can work out how that'll happen. To actually sort of make that a little bit more of an explicit contract has been really powerful, particularly as we're trying to use all of this data for more and more things across AI and ML use cases.
Yeah, and you guys had started with SQL Server, right?
Yes, yeah.
So how, what did that look like transitioning from like a SQL-based database to going to like MongoDB, a document-based data model?
So that transition kind of happened somewhat organically through an acquisition, where we had moved everything to MySQL at one point, and then we acquired a company that was, depending on how you look at it, bigger than our company, and they were a big MongoDB customer. And I think seeing some of the success that they had with MongoDB made it apparent that we wanted to be able to enable that in more places, and that has been a big transition for us as well, is sort of allowing the engineering teams to not just pick the one blessed tool, but having a real platform where people can use the right tool for the job.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too because, for example, you had a data warehouse for batch-based ML, but then eventually you guys had to kind of go to real-time inference in customer flows, and then now like generative AI has kind of introduced like new requirements. What were some of the most sort of compelling features of MongoDB for your generative AI use cases?
Yeah, I think one of the sort of coolest stories internally at DraftKings was there's a large CMS application that was developed in-house that governs a lot of the experiences our customers have loading the app. And it's a little bit complicated for people internally to know, like, hey, what was this customer actually seeing and why at a given point in time? So there's a team working on a hackathon project to sort of try to figure out how they could do this. And they realized, oh, well, actually, we're already using MongoDB for this application. We can just turn on the vector search, and now we can search the content that maybe was in this screenshot and find the relevant content with natural language. And that was a really, really cool unlock for the business, and it ended up being very low lift, as opposed to if we were on some other data store, it would probably have been a lot harder and probably not something that they would have been able to really experiment with.
Yeah, and right now you have a couple key workloads in the sportsbook that rely on MongoDB.
Yep.
And I think we talked about this before because some engineering teams are sort of like still applying a waterfall approach to like iterating with their SQL databases. But it seems like actually it's unlocked both speed and reliability in terms of using something like MongoDB for flexibility for the data model.
Yes, yeah, I mean, it definitely is helpful to not have to think about, oh, well, if we add this new column, how are we going to deal with the schema migration? And that is definitely a pain point that we've had in other places.
Absolutely. And I mean, so what challenges or surprises did you encounter while adopting MongoDB Atlas? Was it smooth sailing, or were there a couple gotchas?
So we had a lot of experience running MongoDB ourselves before the migration to Atlas. I think for the most part, the transition was actually relatively smooth. I think we had to work with you guys a little bit on making sure everything was sort of right-sized and we were not using more resources than we really needed. But I think we really, it was actually a relatively smooth cutover.
I love to hear that. It was smooth, guys. Take note of that. Well, so if you were starting the journey today, again, is there anything that you would do differently or any lessons you want to impart to our audience?
I think it's early probably to do a real postmortem here because I think we're probably still looking back and seeing the starting line and don't see the finish line yet. But I do think what I was talking a little bit about with our that graduation process probably would have helped quite a bit because there was times where people were starting out and they're getting this thing and it's so close to being what they want. You know, they have this workflow built out in N8N and they're calling into a couple of different LLMs and they keep tweaking the prompts and it's almost working, but then something new breaks. And I think investing more in evals and really teaching people how to iterate on this in a way that is going to definitely improve it over time rather than maybe improve it over time would probably have helped out some of the early adopters quite a bit.
Absolutely. And so when you had first sort of started building on top of MongoDB through that acquisition, right? MongoDB was kind of only available as Atlas, right? You had to be a developer to interact with it.
Yes.
But now we have the MongoDB Atlas nodes and also the vector store nodes in N8N.
Yeah.
And we recently had a hackathon as well. Wimmy, what was your impression in terms of some of the projects that had come out?
I mean, it's very cool and very creative, and to see some people who are non-technical really be able to use a database and be able to use a database to, store whatever information they need for their workflows, and then do some deterministic things based on what's in that workflow, and then send that off to an AI agent. That all has been a really, really big unlock, and I think some of the most creative ideas were really limited by not having that. I think when you look at a lot of the sort of processes we're trying to work on, it's a lot of people working in Google Sheets or emailing a spreadsheet back and forth to each other or something like that. So to give someone a real first-class data store is actually a really important step in getting something a lot closer to production. And that we were able to enable something so easy for people to use was really, really important.
And just kind of following up on that, so do you have advice for teams that want to innovate faster but are kind of feeling bogged down by legacy systems or slow processes?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to somewhat pay down the debt in order to do it, and you have to find a way to make time. I think what I typically do is try to work with the business who's asking for all of these. Usually you're not doing some legacy process just because you like it. You're usually doing it because someone's demanding it of you. And you can kind of work with those people to talk to them and get to a point where the process is no longer needed, or is needed, you can get them to kind of co-invest with you and make space for it. And I think that's really the key unlock, is if you can get buy-in from from everyone involved, not just having it come from only engineering.
Yeah, for sure. And when I was an MLOps engineer at MailChimp, we had the saying about meet developers where the toil is and just pay that down. And I think that is a very excellent principle. Now, looking ahead, what's next for DraftKings, especially as AI becomes a core part of the engineering roadmap?
Yeah, I think we're going to look to find ways to move faster and faster and do more and more. I think the company's quite ambitious, and we recently announced at an earnings call that we were going to enter into this new prediction market space. So we'll probably do more and more things and figure out how we can use AI to enable that. But I think we're also going to look more and more at how we can use AI to actually create better and better customer experiences, more personalized, more like faster responses from customer service, things like that.
Yeah, and what I really love about that is you're not compromising on the reliability of Sportsbook. Like you're innovating, but you're still sort of maintaining that high level of user experience.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to use AI because it's AI. We want to build something that's better for our customers. And I think there's certainly, a chat interface is not the right interface for absolutely everything. So we want to do what's right for the customers and build the thing that our customers really want, whether
Awesome.
that be AI or not.
Awesome. And just to just sort of paint the picture in terms of the role that AWS and MongoDB play as you continue scaling, what does that kind of tech stack look like for these folks?
Yeah, so DraftKings is very, very heavily on AWS. Particularly my teams, we are multi-cloud. I know AWS probably doesn't want you to know that, but we're very, very heavy AWS customers. We're heavy MongoDB customers. And I think, like I was saying before, we want to enable people to use the right tool for the job. And I think we'll kind of continue to, each time we have something new we're doing, evaluate what makes the most sense at the time. That'll probably be a lot of Aurora databases at times when that's the right thing. It'll probably be MongoDB. It'll probably be other tools that are out there. I think we have really valued the partnership from both Mongo and AWS in helping us think about some of this AI transition. I think these both have been very helpful in educating the team on what's possible, on being involved in some of these hackathons, training people before them, helping to train some of the non-technical people on what was possible. All of that, I think, has really helped us get more internal buy-in on being able to continue to build with both AWS and Mongo.
Awesome, very cool. I guess any kind of last things the folks here should take away in terms of like engineering at DraftKings or even just AI adoption?
Yeah, I mean, I think my pitch is there's actually a lot of really interesting problems to solve at DraftKings Engineering. So if you have interest and opportunity to work with us, we're very often hiring. So definitely feel free to look at the careers page. But I think the other thing I would say is that in each of your own organizations, really take a look at how you can enable more and more AI usage and just let people learn and upskill. Because we were talking a little bit about like, how do you make sure that you're bringing in the right AI talent? I think you really need to be thinking about how can you generate the right AI talent internally.
Awesome, love that. And so if you guys are looking for a new gig or just want a coffee chat, Jeff did tell me that a lot of his team is here. So take a look at that careers page. He has a LinkedIn. Okay, maybe don't spam him on LinkedIn. But if they do want to connect with you or members of your team, what's the best way to do that?
I'll definitely hang out for a couple minutes outside here if anyone would like to come say hi. And that's probably, you can also add me on LinkedIn. I don't promise, I get a lot of LinkedIn spam. I don't promise that I'll be super responsive there, but you should definitely give it a try. But yeah, I think the easiest way is to come
Awesome.
stop by right after.
Very cool. Yeah, so if you guys had questions that you did not want recorded, this would be a great time to ask them. But yeah, thank you so much, Jeff, for coming and sharing your experiences and insights with this group. Just signing off, everyone. Once again, my name is Makiko. I'm with MongoDB. If you have any questions, also feel free to come hit me up. And if I can't answer it, I will definitely send you to a MongoDB expert that can. So thanks, everyone. Have a great reInvent. Hydrate. Liquid IV is great. And yeah, we'll see you guys later.